Welcome to the podcast series Talking Success, Connecting the Global FinTech Community. I'm Stacey Jafta, and today I'll be chatting with Alex Zeltcer, CEO and co-founder of nSure.ai. nSure.ai is an advanced fraud prevention platform. It is a solution that protects sellers of digital goods, focusing on high-risk domains such as prepaid and gaming. Hi, Alex.
Hey, Stacey, how are you? Thank you very much for having me here.
It's only my pleasure. I'm good. How's your morning going so far?
Not too bad.
What does the world of nSure.ai look like at this time of year heading into December?
That's actually a great question. We're, a big chunk of our clients are within the gift card or prepaid debit card industry, and some of them are in gaming. So the last quarter we see a huge spike in traffic. We need to kind of prepare the entire year for handling that spike in a reasonable fashion. And now we're seeing billions of dollars going through the system. On an annual basis, it's a lot. It's a lot.
It's also Thanksgiving today in the US, with tomorrow being Black Friday. What does that look like in your world?
Yeah, so Black Friday has an impact on some of our clients, but not on all of them. We do have some travel clients that we've seen the last week pick up, and obviously today is going to be almost nothing, and tomorrow is going to be like 3 times a normal day, which I think is like every other e-commerce business these days. An interesting thing for us is we're wearing the white hats, right? We're fighting fraud, and it's a common mistake. I think that fraud is higher during this season. And actually it isn't. It's roughly the same. And
really?
Yeah. Percentage-wise, it's smaller because there's a lot more genuine traffic. So
Got you.
The most important thing is to figure out how not to deter or decline legitimate consumers rather than catch the fraudsters in these days. So it's an interesting drill to run.
Yes. Before we dive any deeper, do you mind just giving a quick intro into you, your background, and essentially what led you to build nSure.ai?
Sure. So, my half of my career roughly is with corporates, and half of it is with startups. I started with a large Israeli high-tech company at the time, a company called Converse, that ran voicemail. We were the biggest voicemail vendor worldwide, had more than 50% market share. Where I ran a group of somewhere between 100 and 250, 300 engineers for a pretty long time. I was then brought on board to run a company that a big French company acquired in Israel, a company called Dassault Systems acquired a company called Smarting, and they brought me on board to run that. Again, a mid-sized organization. We were about 350 people worldwide, dealing mostly with sales of product lifecycle management products. And it was a very interesting ride for me and for the company. We went from about 30 million to 100 million in less than 3 years. That was a very fun ride. And there basically I started my journey in the startup world. We founded a company called Artisan, a zone for artisans. That was very unique at the time. Was an online farmers market, you could say, and delivering groceries from small stores, small farms in different metro areas in the U.S. We've serviced Chicago, Denver, and Dallas at the time. Pretty large business, including the trucks, the walk-in coolers, the warehouses, and all of that, and of course the technology platform that allows for all of that to happen same day. And then the question after selling that business in the US to a number of grocery chains, I came back to Israel. I was with the family for a few years in the US. Came back to Israel and was brought on board to run the business of a company called Zeek. Zeek was actually a marketplace for gift cards, which is where I kind of learned how difficult it is to sell digital assets online, which eventually led to the birth of nSure.ai, the current company. I've started together with my partner Steve 3.5 years ago. And then we basically built a company based on a problem we solved for ourselves at Zeek. We found fraud to be extremely scalable and extremely difficult to fight in this industry. Decided to invest heavily in figuring it out on our own because couldn't find solutions out there that would provide an efficient enough solution for us. And then when we realized how strong the technology we built is, decided to kind of spin it out, brought external funds, acquired the technology and the team, and started nSure based on that. So it's been a fun ride.
Awesome. One theme that seems really prevalent throughout your career is you come into businesses and help them scale. This is a topic we've spoken about over and over again, but I think that what's really different about you is you come into businesses and really try to understand when to scale. It's not about how to, but necessarily understanding when is the right time. How do you identify the point at which you can start scaling? Like, what do you look out for?
So I think it's very different, obviously, between corporates and startups, because at corporates, you have a product, it works, there's a price list, there are salespeople, and then it's really primarily about execution. But in startups, I think in general, startup is a journey in reducing risks, and it starts with reducing the fundamental risk, and it does it work. So you have an idea, you have no idea whether it can be implemented or not. You go out, you raise seed or pre-seed or whatever these rounds are called today, and you create an MVP, you create a minimum viable product, and you verify that, yes, your dream can come true, at least from an operational perspective. It does work. And then the second piece is what we normally call in the startup world product market fit. And that means that you're able to sell the product, not just give it away for free, but sell it at a price that is at the price that is higher than the cost of producing it. So, it's fairly easy to create a business that is very scalable, where you come in, a person gives you $1, you give them back $2, right? That's going to be very scalable. However, that's not a business. That's a charity. So if you want to see a business, it needs to be the reverse, right? Someone's going to give you $2. It's going to create. You're going to incur $1 to create whatever value you provide them, and then you are left with some margin. So you get to product market fit when you have enough traction. You can show that there are enough people that are interested in this. If it's a B2C, a business to consumer business, then you need to see traction with consumers. There are enough there that are willing to pay for the product. If you're running a B2B company, then you need to show that there are enough businesses that are interested in that. And there are different ways of figuring it out. It can be on the velocity of sales. It could be on the size of the business you reached. But that's really the most important element to identify when a business can start the next phase. So once you have product market fit, the next phase is what we call go-to-market fit. Go-to-market fit means not only can you sell the product to a good number of clients at a profit above whatever it costs you to produce the product, you can also bring them at a cost that is not prohibitive. So, for instance, you sell a product for a yearly charge of 100, it costs you 50. Now, bringing the customer on board may cost you 500. And then it means that you're going to see the return on your investment in 10 years because you're making $50 a year. So in 10 years, you'll make you'll be profitable. That doesn't make sense. You cannot run a business that way. If on the other side, you can, create an ROI within a month or a day, then obviously it's a great business. And the question is really that we call these, factors CAC to LTV, customer acquisition costs versus the lifetime value. So you're trying to create a combination where the lifetime value is significantly higher than the customer acquisition cost, and you get to profitability within a short term. And that's when you actually realize that you can scale the business. Because at that point in time, if someone gives you $20, you can make 40 out of it. So better they give you 20 million than you make 40 million or higher numbers. So the real question is to identify that point where your product market fit is there, your go-to market fit is there, you've created that balance between acquisition costs and lifetime value. You can generate return on investment within a number of months, depending on the industry. And that's the point where you say, okay, now we're ready to scale. It's very important to identify this point, because if you start scaling before you reached it, you're going to lose a lot of money without getting the results.
Do you think that most startups scale or try or attempt to scale too early, or they miss the mark and maybe push it out? What do you see as more common?
I think more common is they try to scale too early. And the reason for that is, that's not something that I'm inventing, right? There's the Crossing the Chasm and the different books that have been written about that. It's really the early adopters. And when you get, a good bunch of clients that are in love with what you're doing, you may lose sight of the fact that they're the early adopters and they do not represent the mass market. And then when you acquire them, it was fairly easy because they felt the pain, they like you, they like the product, whatever. And then getting the other customers at scale is going to cost you a lot more. So your customer acquisition grows. It's a common mistake for people to believe that as the more customers you bring on board, the bigger the scale, the lower the customer acquisition is. And that is simply not true. Usually customer acquisition costs grow at least at the first time, at the first a few years before you become a brand that is well known, and you can start building on that to grow your acquisition. So most of the failures we see for companies that happen after they've reached a certain level of product market fit and even a go-to-market fit is they've tried to scale too early, not realizing that the customer acquisition cost they're seeing cannot be maintained at scale.
Scott, could you design a video game?
I could make you a hypothetical one. If I took some random genres, mechanics, maybe blended them together, and created a new hypothetical game.
Now that would make a great podcast.
Undoubtedly.
So what would you make? Something original and exciting? A Dark Souls city builder? A co-op roguelike?
Everything. All of that. We could use the Nemesis system and put it in a first-person shooter. And we could have a loot system with survival mechanics and motion controls. And maybe you could... save a kingdom from some out-of-control toasters. What about party?
Catch the Gaming Blender on all your favourite podcast platforms.
Very interesting. Earlier you were talking about scaling when you are offering your product for more than what it's costing you. And I can take, for example, there's a digital bank here in South Africa called Discovery Bank, and they are, from what it looks like, doing well. They have a ton of customers, but they're still making a loss, meaning that it is costing them more to onboard customers than it is for them to be providing the offering. But when you look at that product, it seems like from speaking to different investors, there's different ways of approaching it. It's like, let's go gung-ho, let's put everything we have into this. We're going to probably be making a loss for the next, 3 to 5 years. And then after that, we'll see an exponential growth in profit. What is your thoughts on that?
So I think that there are different kinds of strategies behind different kind of plays on the market. And I'll explain what I mean. So I'm more of a traditionalist in my I would say management style. I don't believe in saying, let's get the people, let's get enough, and then figure out how to monetize. It doesn't mean that it cannot be done, because it has been done before very successfully. So it doesn't mean it doesn't work. It does. Identifying where I think is an art more than a science, but I might be wrong, and other people could talk to that. We do see other plays which are really data plays more than they are anything else, and there you need to accumulate enough data so that you can start monetizing the data or selling the data you have. We've seen a lot of companies being very successful doing that, and that's a very different play, because the product you're selling is not really what you're looking to be profitable at. You're looking to be profitable on the data you have, and it's a completely different business.
Got you.
And that happens. It could be the case for the bank you've just mentioned. I don't know the details, obviously. But again, from my experience and what I'm good at, right? What I'm good at is at figuring out a path to profitability that is based on on this balance and scaling customer acquisition and lifetime value, which is very different than these neobanks we're seeing, the new insurance companies we're seeing, and all of that are all generating a loss. Yeah.
And you started doing this at a really young age. You were growing a business line from 90 to 250 in your like mid to late 20s. What advice do you have for young leaders, either for those like aspiring to run a department or those currently doing so? Because that's huge and very impressive.
First, thank you very much. It's a bit of luck, and I think a bit of more luck than talent. I was fortunate enough to join a company at a huge growth spiral, and did well while I was there. But I think the key takeaway for me was you have to figure out what your own management style is. What are your core values? And find a way to stick to that rather than find a way to adapt to the organization you're in. So I started running the organization that was about 90 people when I started in my mid 20s, and indeed they already had some level of culture in there. One of the main things I think we've done during the first couple of years is we've honed our culture much better. We've done that very, I would say, systematically through a process we did together with psychological, organizational psychologist. I was very young and felt, that the weight of responsibility, and knew that I don't have the experience to run the business and achieve success without getting advice. So we've brought someone on board to help me with that. We've worked together for over a year to hone the culture, and I think my best advice would be: first, don't think you need to do it all on your own, and number two, find your core values early on so that you can shape the organization based on that.
Interesting, because what I have found in speaking to a lot of young leaders is that in the early days, you kind of either mimic what you've seen in the leaders you've had in your life. And I think what's challenging is understanding the way you would like to lead if you've not seen that happen. Like, you get completely different styles. How would you advise someone goes about finding what their leadership style is without being a copycat or just mimicking what they've seen in their current boss or previous boss?
Yeah, so yeah, I think that experience and seeing other leaders behave is crucial, and is shaping our own values. It starts with the family, obviously, right? It starts when you're 6 months or a year old, obviously. And I think that the most important element to realize is that you need to figure out what works for you. Because if you try to mimic others in things that don't work for you, you fail miserably. That's what I found, and I did have my share of failures in that domain. When you try to do something that doesn't work for you, let's say you believe in taking decisions, clear-cut decisions, fast, and that's what works for you, etc. And then you come into an organization where they take the decisions by consensus, and everything takes a very long time. And you figure out, okay, let's give it a test, let's give it a try. It makes sense. I can understand logically why it could, help me harness the power behind the organization if I do that collectively, etc. And then, at least for me, I have to admit that was a huge failure when I tried something like that. And it's and it doesn't work for everyone. It works. It works for certain individuals that are built in a certain manner, right? We're born a certain way. Some things we can hone, a little bit, but we have to go with what we're given, and make the best out of that.
In your previous businesses, you mentioned that you had almost a commando culture with like long hours and almost what I say you have to do. Where was that? Was that learned, or did you feel like that was something that you saw worked in the past? How was that created?
So I think that's a mentality I kind of learned from Converse. I was always a hard worker. My father always believed in hard work and making sure that you're a straight A student. Nothing below that is good enough. So excellence was always important to me. Getting to excellence, is in the business world is way more complicated than when you're a student, obviously. Um, and the results are not a test, not a grade on a test or whatever. It's the results are eventually in dollars. So and that combined with the leadership style I've seen in Converse and kind of instilled in me, I think, this kind of culture where you have to make sure you do everything to the best of your ability. You go the whole 9 yards, and that's the only way you stand a chance of succeeding. And I adopted that very early on, I think. I would say with my first management job.
You briefly mentioned when we first met that you felt like you made a mistake coming into one of your new positions and you were running it the same way as you ran your previous business. What would you have done differently? And now when you enter a new environment, how do you approach it?
Yeah, so really, I think the learning for me there was really, yeah, the one that I mentioned earlier. You have to be true to your own values, and and very early on at Converse, when I started running uh, the 90 to 100 people organization, about a year into it, I was asked to merge two organizations into one, to basically take over another group of engineers, and it grew the organization I'm responsible for overnight from roughly about 100 people to about 250. And at that point, I did not continue to run it as a commando, I would say, but I tried at that point. I tried to kind of figure out what are the discrepancies or the differences between the cultures, because there were significant differences in the culture, and I tried to adapt some of my older organizations' culture into the new organization we were kind of merging with. I've created a management team that was basically half from my original group and half from this new group, and that's when I didn't stay true to my values and try to create an environment that is different. And that's the point where I felt, I think today, from a managerial perspective, is my biggest failure to date. We overcame it, but it took us probably 6 months of, I would say, being very inefficient in what we're doing, because I wasn't very certain of my way forward. I didn't take the decisions in the way I thought I should. I took the decisions in the way I thought that the other organization would feel more comfortable with. And that it simply fails. And that's my biggest learning, I think.
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
No, that's a tough one. And you can, you speak about values quite often, and culture eats strategy for breakfast. How have you at nSure.ai lived by this philosophy? And hearing what you've gone through and your career journey, what are you doing now to make sure you live by that?
So first of all, it's very difficult to do that because the test I have for myself is very simple. You wake up in the morning, you ask yourself, are you proud of what you're achieving and the way you're behaving? And unfortunately, most days the answer is no, which means you need to do better. And for me, I'll share with you a little bit about the values I'm trying to instill and how we do that. But for me, it's really all about leadership behavior, right? It's about the management team and what they believe in and how they behave. It's not about what they say. It's not about the signs we put on the in the corridors. It has nothing to do with speaking. It has only to do with behaving and doing. And that's the first thing to understand, I think, because people see, even as very young kids, you see your parents do stuff, you hear them talk about stuff, you're influenced by what they do, not by what they speak about. And it's true for everybody. So I'll give you a few of the core values we try to live by and ensure and the way we do that. So one thing that I strongly believe in is that people within a certain organization are either engines or weights. There's no in between. It's very easy to identify who's an engine, and that means that everybody else is a weight.
Wow.
And,
Wow.
and that's my belief. And what we do there is either we find a way to turn this around and someone becomes an engine, and it does happen, or we let go. And I think that and it's better for both sides, because if someone is in an environment where he doesn't excel, it doesn't mean that he's not doing something right. It's just the wrong environment. I've seen a lot of people that you take them out of one environment, put them in another, and they thrive. So for me, it's really about making sure at every given point in time that you can identify who are your engines, who are your weights, and manage. That's extremely important. And behaving that way means that you share that view with your management team, and you keep on asking the question: if someone's not performing well enough, is he away? If he is away, what are you doing about that? And being
Yeah.
very adamant about doing that. So that's one example. Another example that I find extremely important for startups is normally when you are in a corporate environment, your responsibility and accountability are very close to each other. And usually, if you have a rectangle that represents your responsibility, the next guy just beside you has another rectangle which has a little bit of an overlap with yours. Right? There's a little bit of an overlap between your responsibilities, and it is built that way so that nothing falls through the cracks. In startups, what happens normally is that if your rectangle starts and ends in a certain place, the next rectangle is going to be miles away. There's a huge gap between you two. No one's
Yeah.
responsible for it today because you don't have enough resources to do that. And therefore, the mentality in startups needs to be, when you see something falling through the cracks, the first thing you need to do is not to ask yourself, okay, so who needs to take care of it? But the first thing you pick it up, you pick the ball, you do what needs to be done, and then you figure out, okay, so what did we miss? Who needs to be
Yeah.
responsible
Yeah.
for this, etc.
Yeah.
And that's an essential learning for the entire organization, right? Until we get, from my experience, before you get to a few hundred people, you never get to a position where responsibilities are clear enough, for almost everything to fall in someone's responsibility. So it's a long term process where
Yeah.
before you reach 300, 400 people, you're not there yet. And instilling that culture of, you see something fall, you don't ask yourself whose responsibility it is. You assume it's yours. You take it, you fix it, then you move on. That's a piece that I think
Yeah.
is very difficult for people sometimes to adjust to, because it's almost counterintuitive. Why would you do something that no
Yeah.
one told you need to do? Right? It's not your responsibility.
Mm.
Why do that? You're not going to be good at doing it, right? But the problem is, you need to understand, if you're not doing it, no one else is going to be doing that, and that's going to hurt the company.
An analogy that I recently heard about environments can be good for different people is take boiling water. This is the environment. You take an egg in boiling water goes hard, a potato in boiling water goes soft. So it's not necessarily the environment's good or bad, it's what's environment is best for you. And that just for some reason clicked in my head. I think we see these trends, and this is really, really common on TikTok, is you see these trends of this is a really bad environment and this is a really good environment, but everyone learns and grows, or in the case of an egg and a potato, goes hard and goes soft in a different environment. And you just got to tap into yourself and really understand, what do you need? And that was really just something I needed to hear.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that as leaders, our biggest responsibility is to provide the people around us with the tools to excel. Right, that's what we need to do. If we do that well, then everything else falls in place. And figuring out what everybody needs to excel is not easy. And and,
Yeah.
if, and and sometimes some people cannot excel in your environment. You need to figure that out, and not be shy about it, but do what's necessary. And
Exactly.
these are not easy decisions, but you have to you have to be very strict on that, especially when you're growing an organization.
Couldn't agree more. Alex, thank you so much for being on the podcast.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Where's the best place for listeners to reach you?
So the best place would be on LinkedIn. Just click my, search for Alex Zeltcer and you'll find us.
Fantastic. Thanks again, Alex.
Thank you very much, Stacey. Have a great day.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of Talking Success, Connecting the Global FinTech Community. Feel free to follow us on LinkedIn at Talent in the Cloud. And if you're interested in exec talent, expanding your team, or you yourself are looking for a new, exciting change in your career, check out our website, talentinthecloud.io.